WMDs, long-range nuclear missiles, terrorist sleeper cells, and threats against Israel and the United States. Those are all terms that the world grew familiar with in the months and years immediately after 9/11, and they are featuring once again in 2012, particularly on the American news media. This time it's Iran, not Iraq, but the terminology is strikingly similar. So are the misgivings of those who warn against an invasion, and there are parallels aplenty in the way the media are conducting themselves. What is different is that unlike the run-up to the Iraq War, which was led by rhetoric coming out of the Bush administration, this time the Obama administration is not saying that much, at least not publicly, but elements within the U.S. media are banging the war drums nonetheless. And some of the very same news organizations that swallowed the flawed or faked intelligence pre-Iraq are up to the same old tricks, using anonymous government and quote-unquote intelligence sources to back up their stories. Our starting point this week is Washington and the lessons from Iraq that appear to have gone unlearned on the Iran story.
Tonight, defying the world. The Iranians claim a major advance in their nuclear program.
The coverage of Iran in the United States by our media has been disastrous.
Iran is changing its game plan.
They seem to be working from very limited vocabulary, very limited images and ideas.
Further proof that Iran wants to join the club of nuclear nations.
It becomes sort of a feeding frenzy, one-upping one another.
All right, showdown with Iran.
You know, the media is the media. It's not perfect.
Iran is warning that it may take preemptive action.
I've seen this movie before, and it does not turn out well.
The movie to which he refers is Iraq.
Saddam Hussein appears to have survived the first wave.
The politicians who took America into that war still defend that decision. However, the U.S. media have, in many cases, admitted to their shortcomings in examining the case for the invasion and vowed not to be manipulated in that way again. They must have short memories.
ABC World News.
The evidence of a kind of shadow war now being waged by Iran around the world.
This ABC News story was filed by the network's chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross.
Brian.
Remember those reports that came out 6 weeks after 9/11, linking the anthrax letters in the U.S. to Iraq? Quoting anonymous sources, Brian Ross broke that story, which would have been good if the story was true. Not only was it false, but ABC News has never retracted it. ABC remains on the record with Brian Ross's Iraq anthrax story.
Israeli diplomatic facilities and Jewish places of worship in at least 10 U.S. cities have been told they could be targets.
Now, more than 10 years later, again quoting unnamed sources, Ross is painting a scary picture of Iran. The Listening Post requested an interview with ABC on this. We received no reply.
It's lazy journalism. It's not that any of the people that work at ABC decided, hey, you know, wouldn't it be great for all of us if we started a war with Iran, like that terrible war in Iraq? They just get a source and they think, okay, well, that's a source. I've got a scoop, so I'm going to run with it. And off to war we go, because look at that. Everybody on TV agrees Iran is very dangerous and might attack, so we best go after them.
Then there was this segment from CNN's Erin Burnett.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Erin Burnett, and out front tonight, Iran's threat to the United States in the United States, right here at home.
She begins with a comment saying, well, the whole world knows Iran is going to build a nuclear weapon. Well, the whole world doesn't know that. So I think sometimes these editorial comments that are thrown in by news anchors are extremely unhelpful.
6,000 miles. That is far enough to hit the United States of America.
I think, how can you possibly say that on television? There are a great number of people who believe that they don't have a nuclear weapons program, because right now, they don't have a nuclear weapons program.
Journalists like Erin Burnett and others need to be especially vigilant not to play up threats that have been discredited or that are seen as premature or exaggerated, and focus on what we actually know. And I think too often in the last couple of weeks, journalists have been looking at what-if scenarios and hypotheticals more than what intelligence we actually have that there's a real threat.
Fear-mongering is the definitive aspect of this kind of journalism. Iran is a threat. This threat is coming to the United States. This threat is coming home to us.
They see a growing possibility of an attack by Iran on American
soil.
The Iranians are not blameless in what has so far been a war of words. One of Iran's state-run channels now features nuclear imagery in its news graphics, even when the story, like the one it's reporting here, has nothing to do with the nuclear issue. It's just a provocative graphic. And there are some examples of the U.S. media altering their approach. CNN host Fareed Zakaria, an enthusiastic backer of the Iraq War, is taking a different tack this time around.
Fareed Zakaria did an excellent interview with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, in which Dempsey said that it's not prudent to have an attack on Iran at this time.
We are of the opinion that the Iranian regime is a rational actor.
So we have some variety.
You've seen some very good coverage of Iran in the past few weeks, but a lot of times that reporting was overshadowed by the more sensationalist types of stories. With recent Iran coverage, you've seen stories playing up the possibility of a threat on U.S. soil, even though there's no evidence so far of a threat on U.S. soil. You've seen these stories rise to the top and oftentimes get more play than the stories that perhaps are more nuanced.
It is very important to keep in mind that this doesn't represent the entirety, the spectrum of American journalism. Right now, as you know, we are mourning the death of a fantastic journalist, Anthony Shadid, who passed away in Syria. They are in print media. They are for people who actually read. Whereas this kind of yellow journalism, you just put the word Iran and nuclear next to each other and throw it at your camera. It is a free-for-all, and they do this kind of journalism with complete impunity.
And if opinion polls are to be believed, then sensationalist, threat-laden reporting in the U.S. is winning the day.
7 out of 10 Americans believe that Iran already has a nuclear weapon. That is so dangerous. That's the kind of misinformation that we had before the Iraq War. So we have that same kind of gross failure by the United States media here, as they have misinformed the American public and unfortunately created propaganda that helps to warmonger against a country that does not have nuclear weapons, and that our intelligence and military officials think it is unwise to attack. But nonetheless, you have that clamoring for it in our media.
Like most big news stories, the coverage of this conflict has been picture-driven. But here's one image most Americans have not seen: a map. That's Iran, in the middle. Each of the stars represents an American military base. There are 44 of them. The country is surrounded. Of all of the questions about Iran being asked on the U.S. airwaves today, they might want to start with this one. Just who is the threat to whom?